All right, good morning, one and all.
Good morning, Rabbi.
How's everybody doing?
All's good.
Good, all right. Welcome back. And we are, gosh, about 10 days or so away from the beginning of Passover. So it behooves us to continue our conversation about it, and to make sure that everybody gets all set for it. There is really nothing like Passover preparation, which I talked about last time. Um, Before I get into the discussions of the Seder, which is what I figured would be the centerpiece of today's discussion, I'm wondering whether anyone has any questions based on what we talked about last time. If you need a little time to kind of figure all that out, that's fine too. But I wanted to see if anybody had any questions that sort of jumped out from last time. All right. All right. Well, no worries. And if you think of stuff, feel free to jump in. So let's talk about the Passover Seder. The Passover Seder is really what Passover is known most for. It takes place always on the first night of Passover, on when you are celebrating Passover outside of the land of Israel. It is the first two nights of Passover. So we are um, very much, we started off with a bang, always, uh, and for many people, the Passover Seder is the probably the moment where you have the uh, greatest amount of observance uh, compared to any other Jewish holiday. Certainly in the home, I would guess that it's maybe the most prominent is lighting Hanukkah candles on Hanukkah, but second only to that would be observance of a Passover Seder. It's something that many people want to be a part of, at least for one night, if not for both. Do you have to host a Passover Seder? You do not have to host one. But some of what we'll be talking about will involve what it means to host one in case the moment arrives where you'll have the chance to do so. What should be paramount in all this is that um, the Jewish community's desire to accommodate people for a Passover Seder uh, cannot be understated. There is a statement common in the Passover Seder, which is, all who are hungry, let them come and eat. And so it is typical for at our Seders to welcome just about anyone who doesn't have a place. In this sense, it's very much like Thanksgiving dinner. If you when you hear somebody who doesn't have a place for Thanksgiving dinner in the United States, we say, "Oh, well, can't we find a place at our table, or can we find somebody who can accommodate?" Passover
Rab-
Seders are really the same sort of thing. Yes.
Rabbi, why I understand why in the United States we celebrate the extra day, but why in the United States do we have Seder the first and second night and they don't in Israel?
So it's because the Seder is really meant to be the centerpiece of the Yom Tov uh, Passover experience, meaning, like the actual day of Yom Tov, when you are not supposed to do work. And since Israel only has one day of Yom Tov for the beginning of Passover, it also has a day of Yom Tov at the end. But since there's only one day of Yom Tov, then you only have the one in Israel. I have to say, just kind of on that I like being able to have two Passover Seders. I know it's extra work and extra expense, but what can be nice is that can have Seder experiences with different groups of people, depending. So, in my own personal case, what I'm able to do is night Seder with my kids in Charleston, and then I can have the congregational Seder in Knoxville. So I'm able to enjoy Seders in two very important ways. So I think that that's a benefit and something that, if you were in Israel, a downside, yes, you only have to plan for one Seder, but uh, it means you only get one chance to have it. So uh, that's the potential downside of it. So anyway, yeah. So, what do you need for a Seder? Well, you need a lot of things. But what I am going to try to do whenever possible is try to say what you need if you only have a minimal amount of resources. Of course, it behooves me, of course, to mention if you haven't already, and if you want a place for a Seder on the second night of Passover, we have a wonderful congregational Seder. We are planning for the night of April 2nd. That's a Thursday evening. We are asking people to come at 4:30 p.m. With the Seder to start promptly at 5 p.m. And hopefully it will be a lovely time. We are certainly intending on that. But regardless, if you can make our Seder, well, then there's also a first Seder to think about if you're able to willing and able to partake in that. So, what do you need to do? So the first thing to note is the ritual items that you need. One of the things that a Seder is best known for is the consumption of 4 cups of wine. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have 4 full servings of wine, although some people enjoy the opportunity and the excuse to do so. It doesn't mean you have to literally down 4 full cups. And what many people do is they'll maybe have like 4 little shot glasses of wine, which has a lot less alcohol. You also, of course, if you don't drink alcohol, are able to have 4 cups of grape juice, as you might imagine. So, why four? Well, four is going to be a big number that we're going to find in the Passover Seder. Four refers to, most famously, 4 different verbs that God says in the Torah that have to do with redemption. There are 4 different verbs that are synonyms. And of course, as I'm saying this, I'm not remembering what the 4 are off the top of my head, but I promise you they're in the Torah. And there are 4 different there are 4 different verbs that God uses that express redemption from slavery. So the idea is that the 4 cups are to represent the 4 types of redemption, the 4 aspects of redemption that God provides. So you're going to need grape juice and or wine. Matzah, as you might imagine, matzah is something that you are going to need. The typical way is at minimum to have 3 pieces of matzah on the table, and with, of course, the middle matzah being broken during the Seder ceremony, which we'll get to in a moment. But at the very least, you'll need 3 full pieces of matzah. Luckily for us, matzah comes in boxes where usually there's about 10 to 12. So you can have that. Now, how much matzah do you need to have in your possession over the course of Passover? Depends on how much cooking you're doing with it, depends on how much you need. Honestly, I think typically we tend to buy way more matzah than we need. It's just sort of a normal thing. We just tend to, it's like, because we say to ourselves, uh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do if it's day 6 and we're out of matzah? We need to have matzah, so we usually tend to buy more than what we need. Oftentimes, you can find grocery stores that sell the matzah boxes in 5 packs. 5 boxes of matzah, that's a lot for one person, but maybe a family might go through it. You don't know. You don't know. Um, uh, so, and by the way, this is just a little bit of an aside, but relating to purchasing food before Passover in general, um, why there's such a rush to get a bunch of to get all your Passover food before the holiday begins. One of the reasons why is that grocery stores tend to um, uh, basically remove almost all of its Passover products the day that Passover begins. I remember one time, gosh, what was it? It was like the 4th day of Passover, and I'm thinking to myself, I need more kosher for Passover potato chips. And I go to the grocery store. It's the whole display was gone. They had moved on. So uh you got to get stuff beforehand. And also and part of what's kind of a pain about this is that grocery stores will say you're not allowed to make returns on Passover items. So, kind of a pain in the neck when it comes to that. But if you buy too much matzah, you're kind of stuck with it. Luckily, there are hungry people in need that will be happy to have matzah if you choose to donate it afterwards. So those are a couple of things we need: grape juice or wine, matzah. Okay. What are the other things that we need? And let me, the visual really does help. So let me, I'm going to pull up Google for a second and and go through, let's see, the just like a Seder plate. And I want to talk about what's on the Seder plate. Let's see. Let me see if I can enlarge any of this. Um, this is a pretty good picture. Okay. All right. So we have the Seder plate. Now here, and I'll try to point things out as we go along. Okay. So a Seder plate is a key part to your Seder table. You need to have at least one of these on your Seder table. Now, what are these items? So why don't we start? Oh, great. Thanks for the ad. Appreciate it. Okay. Okay. So let's start with what we have here at the top. This is you see the bone. That is the zroa. Zroa is a shank bone, and it is a um, literally it's a bone. You now what does it symbolize a couple of different things.
Is anyone
First of
else
all, it
having trouble?
symbolizes
Oh,
it with an outside sound. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
is anyone else having trouble with the rabbi's audio, or is that just
Yes.
mine?
No,
Okay.
I am.
Okay.
We just
Now,
Um,
well,
we
right
basically
now you're
missed.
fine.
okay. All right. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
Let me get a little closer to the to this. How about that? Is this better?
we missed everything from when you began to talk about the bone.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So all right, so I'll repeat that. The bone. The shank bone, it is a it's called Zeroa. and it is meant to symbolize a couple of different things. One is the idea that God took us out of Egypt with an outstretched arm. So it's kind of like an arm, I guess. And the second one is that it is meant to symbolize the Passover sacrifice, the lamb that was slaughtered initially in the story of the Exodus, in which the blood from the lamb was placed on the doorpost, so that the angel of death knew not to come to the Israelite homes when it was the 10th plague, the plague of the slaughter of the firstborn.
You're garbled again, Rabbi.
So those are what I do. Okay. What was the last thing you heard? All right, let me switch over to my phone.
We got a partial explanation of the blood marking the doors, but it was half garbled.
Okay, I'm going to switch over to my phone. I'm sorry, guys. It's not letting me do it. Okay, okay, I'll try one more. I'll try again. We are the blood that is the blood that was put onto the doorposts so that the angel of death would know not to come to the Israelite homes. That is why we have a Passover sacrifice. And so the bone is meant to be a symbol of that. Everybody good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just sorry, just making sure. I apologize for technological challenges. Okay, next one. We go here. This is what's known as maror. Maror is a bitter herb. It is meant to be the most typical kind of maror is horseradish. That's the one you're going to find most often in stores, usually in little jars that have this bright pink um, thing, bright pink substance. And we'll talk about when we actually have it. But the maror refers to the bitterness of slavery. Now, what if you're like me and you find horseradish completely disgusting? Well, thankfully, there is an alternative, and I'll get to that in a moment. Actually, why don't I get to it right now? If you look down here, you see this romaine lettuce. This is what's known as chazeret. Chazeret essentially means a second bitter herb. And romaine lettuce suffices for that because romaine lettuce has a little bit of a bitter aftertaste. And one leniency that I've learned is that if you don't like, horseradish or really other really, really bitter, hot, spicy, bitter stuff, you can have romaine lettuce. I am a wimp, and therefore I have just the romaine lettuce, and that suffices for my roar. So if you don't want horseradish, some people love horseradish. I don't want to yuck your yum if you like it. And you don't have to have romaine lettuce, but it is an alternative. Okay. Next, we have on the lower right part, this is called charoset. Charoset is sweet by comparison. It is basically mushed up apples, like it's usually a mix-up of fruits and nuts and maybe a little bit of wine or grape juice mixed in. I usually do apples and almonds. You can do walnuts. You can do any number of things. Some people like to, mash it up in a food processor, so it's kind of a paste. What I like to do is I like to cut things up, and then I put all the that I take all the things that I've cut up, and I put it inside a gallon Ziploc bag and literally hit it with a hammer. This is Eliana's favorite part of preparing for the Seder, is hitting the charoset with a hammer. She asked if she'll get to do that this time. I said, I'm not sure if we'll have time to do it beforehand, but maybe I'll maybe I'll leave it for the very end and let her get her aggression out. What does it represent? It represents the mortar, the ingredients used for the Israelite slaves to make bricks during their enslavement. So it's kind of an empowering thing. The very thing that our ancestors used while enslaved to aid in their labor now becomes a thing of sweetness. Okay. Next, on the lower left hand, you have karpas. Karpas is a green vegetable. Oftentimes it's parsley. I don't know why parsley was chosen. Maybe it's just easy to find, but really any green vegetable works. Actually, potatoes even work for it. The idea is that you dip it in salt water, the salt water being the tears of our ancestors while they were enslaved. So people take karpas, they'll take this, sometimes they'll dip a cucumber, sometimes they'll dip celery sticks, whatever it might be, and you dip it into the salt water. The final thing is a roasted egg, a hard-boiled egg that then you maybe you burn a little part of it. This hard-boiled egg shouldn't be eaten, but it is meant to represent a couple of different things. The egg, the beitzah, is meant to represent, first of all, rebirth. And also it is meant to represent, once again, the fact that you burn it, it's meant to represent the Passover sacrifice. You don't eat this hard-boiled egg at the Seder. However, it is customary to, a lot of people like to serve eggs at Passover. So, and I forgot to mention, with the karpas, what does the green vegetable itself represent? It's supposed to represent spring. So that's what goes on a Seder plate. You don't have to have a fancy Seder plate that's displayed. Honestly, all you need is a plate, and you just put those items on there. So those are a few other things that you need during the Passover Seder. And then, like I mentioned, the salt water to dip the parsley in. There are a couple of other items, and here I will get out of this. Okay. So the other things to note, first of all, you have then there are a couple of other customs of what to put on the table. one of which is an additional wine glass or glass of grape juice, whatever it is, and that is the cup of Elijah. We invite Elijah the prophet into our Seders. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. But that's the reason why we have that. There's also a more modern custom that we take we designate another cup and we put water in it. And that is the cup of Miriam. We've been taught in our tradition that it was due to the merit of Miriam that the Israelites had water in the wilderness. And also Miriam was closely associated with the celebration after the splitting of the sea, hence water being another symbol of Miriam. And yet another one is that Miriam watches over the basket in which Moses is sent down the Nile River when he is discovered by the queen of Egypt, or the daughter of Egypt, the daughter of the Pharaoh. Anyway, so a lot of symbols for Miriam and water. The other thing, and this is an alternate tradition, but one that people really enjoy. There are some people, and I usually do this, that put an orange on a Seder plate. Why? There are different stories as to why this became a thing. One version of the story is that before women were allowed to be rabbis, that there was some rabbi who was asked, "Hey, do you think women could ever be a rabbi?" And the response supposedly was, "A woman rabbi? There will be a woman rabbi when there's an orange on the Seder plate." And so, in celebration of our egalitarian spirit, we put an orange on the Seder plate because we're glad that there are women rabbis. I've also heard that story basically an identical story referring to queer rabbis. There will be a queer rabbi when there's an orange on a Seder plate. We also welcome people in the LGBTQ community to be our leaders, and so same thing. So whatever version of the story you like, I like to put an orange on the Seder plate. So in terms of preparation, the only other thing that I can think of is that there are many people who take a pillow and they put a pillow on the back of their chairs because we are supposed to recline. The idea is that we are free people and we are supposed to recline. So some people add a little bit of cushioning to their chairs.
Rabbi, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong. Is this also kind of a throwback to the way the ancient Romans used to celebrate on chaise lounges, kind of those images we see?
Precisely. Yeah. So, and keep in mind that the Passover Seder, the rituals for the Passover Seder were pretty much determined a couple of thousand years ago, at a time in which Judaism, or the Jewish people were heavily influenced by the culture of both the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. And so some of the styles that they're speaking of relates to the noble class of those civilizations. All right. So in terms of preparation, those are the things that you basically need. Now, I haven't really talked about what you cook for dinner, but it kind of depends on what you want to cook for dinner. We can talk about that if we're interested a little bit later on. But that's the start of it. Okay, now we get into the actual Seder. When we start the Seder, we start, well, many people start actually by lighting candles to start the beginning of Yom Tov. And then we remind ourselves of what's on the Seder plate, and we literally point out what's on the Seder plate. We then read through or sing sometimes the order of the Seder. Now, the word Seder means order. It means that you're really supposed to go in a particular order, because the command is that we are supposed to think of ourselves as if we had been imprisoned and then redeemed. We should think of ourselves on that Seder night as if we have gone from enslavement to redemption. And it means you got to do things in order so that you can celebrate that experience. So the order of the Seder is there are 15 steps to it. And let me just, again, just to put this up here. Yeah, sometimes they list it as 14. Let's see. Let's see, is this one? Yeah, here we go. By the way, exploringjudaism.com is a very good yeah, it's a very good source for all the things that you need. So, okay, what do we start with? And by the way, at this moment, I'm not able to see you. So when you have questions, or when you have, or if you're having more trouble with my audio, anything like that, feel free to jump in. So this is the order of the Seder. So the first one we do is called Kadesh. That is the recitation of Kiddush, meaning that is the blessing over the first cup of wine. So when you start the Seder, you start basically blessing the first cup of wine. It is a more involved recitation than other subsequent recitations over wine. The next step is Urchatz. Urchatz refers to washing the hands. We are supposed to wash hands at this point without a recitation of a blessing. The reason why we're doing it is because we're about to have a little something to eat. And so we're really doing it for sanitary reasons more than anything else. Appreciate the reminder. Yes, I can do that. Okay. The next one. Actually, what I'll do is, hold on a second. Let's see. Sorry, yeah. Okay. Trying to select all, copy, and then I'm going to put this in the chat. Okay, so I just put this website in, this article into the chat. Okay, we're about to eat. That's why we're washing our hands. And what are we eating? We're not eating very much. We're having karpas. That's when we say a blessing for eating a vegetable, and we dip it into the salt water. Now, by the way, just a kind of a healthy tip for you is that if you are planning on having a long service, if you're planning for your service to go kind of a long time, for the Seder, then it may behoove you to have some crudité. And you can have, once you've said a blessing over the vegetables, you can have really kind of any vegetables. So you can feel free to munch on, celery or carrots or, uh, green pepper slices, whatever it is, just to kind of, beat back any hunger that you might feel. Next, we have what's known as yachatz. Yachatz refers to the breaking of the middle matzah. Now, remember I told you there are 3 pieces of matzah on the table at the very least. We break the middle one, and the larger of those 2 pieces, because let's face it, matzah never breaks evenly. The larger of those 2 pieces, we wrap it up, and we use it as dessert. I can hear you cry, what kind of dessert is a piece of matzah? Fair enough. But we usually make a game out of it. The typical thing we do is we hide that piece of matzah somewhere in the house, and then after we eat the meal, people look for it. The kids look for it, and oftentimes we have a little prize for them, whoever finds it. So we make a game of it, and one of the reasons why we have it is to keep the kids interested and awake, frankly, for the rest of the service. Okay. With that, we get to the Magid. The Magid is when we actually tell the story of the Exodus, and it has a number of aspects to it. I do want to get to the full order of the Seder, so I'll talk about Magid hopefully a little bit later. In fact, that actually might be what we do at the at our session next week, is when I can maybe go a little more in depth into the Magid, and maybe some other songs and customs of the Seder itself. So maybe that's what I'll do, part of what I'll do next Sunday. But the Magid usually is the longest part of the Seder, and the longest part of, at least, of the Seder service. When the end of the Magid is when we drink the second cup of wine. The next few steps take place in relatively rapid succession. When we're done with the Magid, we are getting very close to the meal, but we have to do a few things before we get there. The first thing we do is called rachsa, and this is when we wash our hands again, but we're washing our hands for a different purpose. First, it was the first time we did it, we didn't say a blessing, and it was really just because we were about to eat something. But with the rachsa, the second time we do it, we do say a blessing over hand washing. And we do so because we're about to eat bread, well, matzah, but the custom is throughout the year that, just in general, that we are supposed to do a ritual hand washing before the consumption of bread. And so Passover is no different. The bread might be flat, but we still keep the same custom. So we wash our hands with a blessing. And then we have a step that is known as motzi matzah. Motzi matzah, it's really 2 blessings in rapid succession. The first one is to actually say motzi, to say the prayer over bread. And then there's a second blessing in which we say thank you to God for the commandment to actually eat matzah. So that's what the motzi matzah custom is. Everybody good? Just want to make sure I can be heard and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Awesome. Okay. Maror. Maror is when we actually eat the bitter herbs and we say a blessing over the maror, over the command to eat maror. And now, and the typical way is to dip a piece of matzah into the maror and to eat it. So again, for me, it's simply a matter of taking a little bit of romaine lettuce and, putting it on the matzah and having a little snack. Now that snack gets a little bigger because this last step before the meal is called korech. Korech is when we combine the matzah, the maror, and the charoset, and we eat it kind of like a sandwich. Once we have had that little sandwich, then we are ready for the full meal.
Hold on, Rabbi. Are there
Yes.
short little blessings in between each one of these steps? And are those usually in the Haggadah?
Yes, all of these blessings are in the Haggadah. The blessings, so there's a blessing for rachza, for the washing of the hands. There are 2 blessings for motzi matzah. And then there is a blessing for maror. There's no blessing for korech because we've just said all the blessings we need up until that point.
Thank you.
Sure. And then we can eat dinner. And it's the idea is that it's supposed to be a nice dinner. It doesn't have to have 10 courses or anything like that, but this is a celebratory meal. So, if you are a meat eater, it is a time where, people are often having chicken and or turkey and or brisket. Those are very typical. If you are not a meat eater, sometimes, if you're a fish eater, then you might have like a nice piece of fish. And then there are other vegetarian and vegan options that are out there as well. Some people, by the way, do eggplant parmesan. I've seen that because, eggplant, there's nothing wrong with eggplant in terms of Passover. And you put some kosher Passover sauce and kosher Passover cheese and voila. So you've got some different options there. As I mentioned, there is the custom of the hiding of the afikomen. That consumption of the afikomen takes place at what is known as tzafun. Tzafun is when you basically say we are done with the meal, and we set it. And we find the afikomen. Usually, we give a little prize for whoever finds the afikomen. In order to keep the peace in the house, I make sure to have prizes for all of my kids because that's just the right thing to do. Yeah. So there's that. Now, by the way, you say to yourself, ugh, what kind of dessert is a piece of matzah? I'll tell you what kind of dessert is a piece of matzah. When you get chocolate covered matzah, I highly recommend that your middle matzah should be a chocolate covered matzah if you can find one, which they do sell some in some places, so that you can have a sweet something sweet to look forward to when you're eating the matzah. When we get to once we've had that, then we have barech, which means the grace after meals, or the Birkat Hamazon. Once we have done that, we have the third cup of wine. The last two sections are known as Hallel and Nirtzah. Hallel is a reference to literally the Hallel service that one chants on a special day on a major holiday. So we tend to sing songs from Hallel. And then Nirtzah is really the only thing you have to do for Nirtzah, for the last part of the Seder, is to really sing next year in Jerusalem, the prayer that we are, that next year we should be redeemed and all in Israel. So really all you have to do for Nirtzah is to say Lishana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim. However, there are a number of other songs that one typically sings at the Passover Seder, and that's something I think we should also talk about next time, some of those fun songs. Now, I want to talk about a reality that sometimes exists when it comes to the Passover Seder. The reality that sometimes exists is that people who come to Passover Seders, if they're not accustomed to the Seder, it can be a challenge to get people to stay after the meal. It can be a challenge sometimes. And it depends on a couple of things. First of all, it depends on how lengthy you're making all the stuff that happens before the meal. And then it also depends on what your starting time is for the Seder. Now, if one were being strict in terms of Jewish law, at the very least for the first Seder, one would start the Seder after nightfall. And you would expect a very late night. I will acknowledge that I typically don't do that. I don't wait until nightfall to do it. The idea that the reason why I don't, the main reason I don't, is because of my kids, but also because of my guests, depending on which guests I have, because some guests are not really accustomed to having a Seder that doesn't start till, let's say, 8:30 at night, and then might go on till midnight or 1 in the morning. Those are choices that that one would have to make in their own household. I respect those who do make that choice, but it can be tough sometimes to do that. So that's one thing to that's another thing to note, that sometimes it's tough to get people to stick around. I remember growing up that my family, when we weren't necessarily focused on doing a full Seder, but we were thinking to ourselves, okay, we do want to kind of keep the party going, or we do want to keep the gathering going. I remember there was one year where after the meal, we played Trivial Pursuit, which is lengthy in its own right. And then I also remember one year, and please understand that I am not endorsing this, but I remember that one year we watched a recording of after we'd had the Seder meal. We watched a recording of the Jackie Mason one-man show, The World According to Me. Jackie Mason being a famous sort of Borscht Belt type comedian that made a big comeback on Broadway in the 1980s. He is so. Uh, was it Jewish? Kind of. Was it what I recommend today? No. Did it help kind of keep our little community of the Seder going? Yeah, it did. It did. You have to kind of try to gauge what your crowd is able to handle, which leads me to a thought about the Magid. I told you that Magid is the part where we actually tell the story and is often the lengthiest part of the Passover Seder. There are some people who look in the Haggadah, in a traditional Haggadah, and say, we have to say every word of this out loud. For those who wish to do that, sei gesund. Feel free. Right? I already see in the group chat, not me. And I will acknowledge, not me either. And let me tell you why. It's not that there are things in the Haggadah that aren't interesting or aren't important. But especially when it comes to the Magid, we have to keep in mind the purpose of the Seder in general. The purpose of the Seder is to tell the story. And when you look at the Magid itself, you might expect that if our goal is to tell the story, then the Magid would simply start with chapter 1, verse 1 of the book of Exodus and keep going until the Israelites are redeemed. You would think that it'd just be a matter of reading those 15 or so chapters in the Torah. But no, the traditional Haggadah doesn't do that. It already assumes that you know that and basically talks a lot about how important it is to tell the story. So really, the Magid in the Haggadah is basically about a story about the story. So what's more important to me is to do kind of hit the highlights of the Magid, which again, we'll get into next week. But then to have a discussion about what it means to be enslaved and what it means to be free. In what ways are we enslaved, literally or figuratively, today? And in what ways can we seek and hopefully achieve a sense of freedom? When you host a Seder, you create for that evening a community. Whether it's just a couple people, whether it's a dozen people, whether you're hosting, like some people I know, 30, 40 people. Some people do that. Or whether it's a congregational Seder, where you might have, like we have, more than 100 people. You're creating a community for that moment. And so your overall job is to talk about these themes. It's to talk about the ideas of what it means to be enslaved and what it means to be free. And it's worthwhile to think about that starting now, I think. I mean, starting, leading up to the holiday, and to come up with a lot of different discussions, questions you might want to ask people, topics you might want to explore. On the lighter side, there are people who make Haggadot with different themes. They have their Seders. They make their Seders into into theme nights. One of my friends is particularly good at this. He has a tradition every year of making a different Seder with a different theme every year. One year, his theme was The Wizard of Oz. Another year, his theme was Harry Potter. Another year, his theme was Hamilton. Another year, he created a murder mystery. Didn't murder anyone, but you know what I mean. Did it keep people engaged? Absolutely. Was it a little off the beaten path? Yeah. But it was a lot of fun. This talks about the potential of what the night can be. Again, if you want to just read through what's in the Haggadah from beginning to end, if that is meaningful to you, if that is interesting to you, if that helps you to get a lot out of the holiday, again, sei gesund. Enjoy. Yes, the tradition of creating your own Haggadah, family traditions or special music. Let me do that next time. Let me do that next. Yeah, because it's a big topic, and I think it's something that we can explore in addition to all the fun songs that we will talk about. So next week we'll talk more about Magid, more about the songs at the end, and then also about family traditions. I think that should be a good collection of topics for us next time. And any quick question before we go? All right.
So
Thank you.
how
Yeah.
did your friend do the theme Seders?
How did he do it? Really creatively. I think I had him send me one. He emailed me years ago, I think, one of the Haggadot he created. The way he did it was he basically made a script for everybody who was at the Seder.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of work, but it was totally worth it. I'm not saying you have to go into that kind of detail. I mean, he just got a big kick out of it. But he did it while also including, the major traditional aspects of the Seder. So, I mean, he really, he did a great job with it. All right. Well, very good. I appreciate it. And I will look forward to this time next week. Thank you for putting up with my audio issues, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.